All right. Well, thanks for joining me on our first virtual podcast. We are expanding our horizons. So I'm joined by Valerie Hill. She is a structural engineer, professional engineer out of Charlottesville, right?
Yep. Yep.
So why
Thanks
don't
for
you
having
tell us about a little bit about yourself, how you got started, why you do what you do, and all that fun stuff.
me. So I went to Virginia Tech and ended up in Charlottesville, which is the opposite of what most Hokies do. But I worked for a design firm in Charlottesville from 2014 to 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic, and switched to a forensic engineering firm doing mostly like home insurance claims and um, basically failures with wind, hail, tornadoes, hurricanes, fires, trees versus houses, cars versus buildings, um, and figuring out, what happened, the extent of damage, and how to fix it. And then about last year, I missed doing some design work and decided to open up my own company to do kind of on the side and supplement my home, you know, uh, home insurance claim work. And it's kind of taken off. So I do residential, like small residential projects, but as big as custom residential houses,
Right.
additions, renovations, homeowners who want to take out bearing walls, or if they don't even know if it's a bearing wall. I work with real estate agents and home inspectors like yourself to determine what, happened and when things came up in, home inspections, and mostly cracks in foundations is the
Yeah,
main thing that comes up. But I come out and help you guys out and write reports and figure out what happened and how to fix it.
that's right. Yeah, we partner with a local engineer that I knew before he started his own business here in the Richmond area. And when he called me and told me he was looking to get started, kind of shift his focus into doing more of the engineering side and consulting. I told him the bar is pretty low, in the real estate world. So once you get started and you're halfway good, this is going to take off.
Yeah.
Because he was doing some real estate as an agent, and I said, "Yeah, that's not going to last. You're just going to be too busy," and that's what happened. Word started getting around the work that he does, the type of work he does, and got busy really quick. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
imagine starting it as a side hustle, as they say.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. How do you manage that from getting too out of control, or is that your plan one day just to go ahead and go full time?
I don't know. It's kind of up in the air. I intended it for to only become a side hustle and just supplement income. But there was a big hole in the market here. Like all of the design firms in town want to focus on the bigger projects like commercial, the hotels, multifamily living, UVA stuff.
Yeah,
So there was just a big hole for residential and no one was filling it. There was one guy that was filling it, but I think he's moving towards retirement. So I'm trying to fill kind of that spot. And I think maybe eventually I'll do this full time. I'm not at that point yet. Having a salary is nice, but
yeah, yeah,
it's nice security, especially right now in this, market and everything
yeah.
that we have right now. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I try to be upfront with people about how busy I am or how I can fit in stuff. There's you know the real estate market, you have to do everything in like 2 days.
Yeah.
That come out and then give them a report like the next day.
Sure.
And so a lot of times I can kind of fit that in my schedule in between doing design work. Especially if I center it around picking up or dropping off my kid from daycare.
Right.
So it ends up working out okay, and it's a quick turnaround, quick payment. That's kind of nice. So
Yeah.
it's I'm having a hard time balancing things still,
Yeah.
especially when I'm trying to buy a house myself. So trying to balance being a mom, having my own side business, being a full-time employee, and then also buying a house, which we're going to do a bunch of renovations for. It's
Sure.
a lot. So
Yeah.
TBD about how I actually end up balancing everything.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody a couple days ago, and I told him I joke about once a week I look on LinkedIn to see what job postings are open.
Hmm.
Because one day it's fun being self-employed, and the other day you want it to be somebody else's headache. Uh,
Yeah.
it's the best idea and worst idea all at the same time.
Yeah.
My biggest problem and was and is being able to say no when
Yes.
someone calls and they want a service or they need something. Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, can you come do this? Sure. Instead of saying no.
Yeah.
So that's why I have Courtney now. So she says no for me. Uh,
Oh, I need one
and
of those.
yeah, well, I know that's a different level of stress as well when you have one. But so that's one of the hardest things that for me was starting to say no, or learning to
Hmm.
say no, and set those boundaries because burnout's real.
Yeah.
The balance it's no longer a balance. It's just all one sided.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, same thing. We got married, 2 kids. My wife's an agent, so she has all the agent hours.
Hmm.
Houses on weekends and late night showings and all that fun stuff. And our kids are 8 and 13, so it's sports 5 days a week during fall and spring and school and what are we gonna do with them in the summer and all that stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's tough. It's tough, especially like I said, when you got a full-time job and a side business that has a high demand. Uh,
Yeah. It's also hard when you're getting the verbal referrals from the people you have good relationships with. And so you feel obligated to say yes
right.
and, appease them. I find myself having problems with that. Like, I want to maintain a good
Yep.
relationship with these people, but I also have to be realistic with my time at
Yeah,
all and
absolutely.
balancing everything. That's what I'm having a hard time with. I can pass on things to people that I don't have that relationship with yet, but um, those personal referrals, I'm like, oh, okay, let's see what I can do.
Yeah. So what was one of your or has been one of your biggest challenges to starting your own business?
Um, I kind of just like stumbled through everything. Um, I I think I looked up on Google or something about how to do an LLC, and then was like, oh, I guess I need a business license. Oh, I guess I need to register with like Deport, and oh, I guess I need to do this now and register my house as my
Yeah,
office.
yeah.
I was like, oh, I guess I need to do this. So I stumbled for about 2 months, and then it took me like 9 months to make a website. I'm like, I guess I need a website now. It was not very well organized dive into
Yeah,
business ownership, uh, which is very interesting for me because I'm very type A and I like to plan things out. So that was not my preferred way of becoming a business owner. But I think the biggest thing is wearing many hats. And I'm sure when you started out, it was like you're the marketing person, you're the admin person, you're invoicing, you're talking to clients and scheduling, and then you're also doing the work.
yep.
So it's like that's your admin time takes up 40% of your time, maybe not that much, but you know, on, maybe during a couple of weeks it is 40% of your time. But I think that's probably going to end up being a big part for me is, do I ever want to expand and have employees? I don't know.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah,
think this was ever going to be my full-time thing. So it's like, am I able to wear all those hats for long term? I don't know. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's pros and cons to both of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Being by myself, it's I have a lot more quality control over everything.
Hmm.
It's just me.
Yeah.
When you have employees, it's nice because if I don't want or I want to do something else on a Tuesday, and I can block that off and still generate revenue for the company. You know, 'cause
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
employees do it, but there's also a whole other set of issues that come with it.
Hmm.
You know, good and bad, but so there's pros and cons to both. It just depends on what you want to do. And for me, I'm 40, yeah, 40, and you know, I know there's a limited time of how many crawl spaces I'm going to be going into that I want to go
Yeah,
into. So
yeah.
that side of it as well. You know, how long am I going to be wanting to do that? So
Hmm.
you know, I still got a while for sure. But there's also that balance point too of being in the field and running a business and having employees. You know, being that working you
Yeah,
know,
yeah. I mean, you have
so
the opportunity to pull back and just be the head person and have employees do the crawl spaces for you when you no longer can.
yeah,
So that's nice.
yeah,
That is one
and
benefit.
yeah, and there's that scaling too.
Hmm.
There's that breaking point where you know when you're by yourself, you make a lot of money, and then
Hmm.
you hire a couple employees and you don't make any money. And then you get to the point where you hire a few more, and now all of a sudden you're generating a lot more revenue than you could
Hmm.
yourself. You know? But there is that in between. You know, for home inspection, you can have a couple guys, and you do pretty good. But when you get you know plus five, you know 5, 6, 7, you know 10 inspectors, that's when you can really just step back and
Hmm.
just manage the operation and don't have to worry about you know inspections and stuff. So
Hmm.
there is a breakover point with that. Uh, you know, and you know, I don't know what that looks like in your industry. Yeah.
It's if you're hiring like new grads or young employees, then it there's like a almost like 6 month period of time where you're really mentoring them heavily and watching over them. And then like their turnaround rate, they usually stay for 2, 3 years and then go off somewhere else, and then you have to do that again.
And that's
Um,
tough, especially
yeah,
starting out, because now you're splitting your revenue.
yep,
Uh, yeah, it's you're generating revenue through one person, but you're sharing it with two. And
yeah, and you're not being very efficient with your time or
exactly,
theirs. Yeah.
exactly. And usually by the time you're doing that, you're still in that growth mode, so you're just burning money. So it's not
Hmm.
like you have a lot of capital, you know,
Yeah,
typically,
yeah.
to be able to do that and spend for it. And it's hard in the inspection industry as well because it's the same thing. You know,
Hmm.
somebody who's licensed, and now it's you know 4 to 6 months of training, and you're not generating revenue, you're costing me money. And
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
it's an investment and it
yeah,
turns over every time you get a new employee.
yeah, it's good times. So, so I don't have the stats. I know inspectors or the inspection industry is primarily male dominated. There is been more females. We got a couple women inspectors in the Metro Richmond area. Seem
Yeah,
to be pretty good. I imagine engineering is probably the same. Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, what's that like? And have you had any issues, especially in your business,
Um,
dealing in real estate side?
Not so much in my business now, but previously when I was at a company and I like just got out of college and just started, I would go to meetings or, you know, continuing education classes, and they would ask me what I did for the company after asking all my male, coworkers, like, "Oh, you guys are the structural engineers." I said, "What do you do?"
Do you go get the
Well, I
coffee?
don't, right? I'm like, I have a master's degree. None of them do.
Yeah.
Like, so that's a little frustrating. And I've had contractors, I think it's a lot of contractors, um, who don't like being told that they're doing things wrong,
Yeah.
especially by a woman, especially by a young woman.
Mhm.
So me telling them like, hey, that's not up to code. It might, I mean, maybe it was never up to code, but it's not up to code now.
Right.
And you need to change it. You need to do things the way that I tell you because I'm the one with the license and the liability. And they give me, a little bit of flack back for it. So it's a little bit of that. I've had I don't know if it was because of a woman or not, but I had one guy homeowner kick me off of his property because I wasn't giving him the answers that he wanted to hear. So that felt great. I just sent this was for my forensic job, and
Yeah.
I sent my boss. I was like, "Look, I think he wants because he was an older man. It's like I think he wants like an older guy to
Sure.
go out on site," and he was totally fine with that guy. So, oh my gosh, but yeah, with my job now, with my business now, I get a lot of positive feedback from homeowners and real estate agents because real estate agents are prime. I would say it's like pretty heavily female based.
They are. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess women just like working with women, which I get that, and I think that we don't have that. Like, I don't like talk down to people, when I explain things. So I think they appreciate that too. And I've gotten feedback from homeowners as well, because most of the people who are doing renovations are the women who
Yeah.
care about the walls being knocked down. So, I can tell them like, oh, you can go back this far, and we're just gonna have this drop beam and have them kind of visualize it a little bit better. And I think that they appreciate that too. So I've gotten a lot of positive feedback about being a woman in the industry
Yeah.
here in Charlottesville for my current business. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for
But I
makes
have
you
to
feel any
say,
better, contractors don't like what we have to say either. So we tell them that that's wrong. But we can't do
yeah,
anything about it. So they don't care what we have to say. They just don't like it.
yeah,
You carry a little bit more weight when
I
you say it's
do.
wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And
I
they
know
still
that
don't.
talking to some of the in some of the Facebook groups with some women inspectors, one of the biggest issues that they have is the dad or the uncle showing up with the buyer. The buyer's
Hmm.
20 some years old, and their dad used to be a contractor back in the 70s
Yep.
for a summer, and they'll quiz them. They'll just ask
Yep.
them a bunch
Yeah.
of questions, to see what they know, just kind of be a little condescending. And so they really gotta, I say no more, because there's just that stigma attached to it.
Hmm.
They got to prove themselves a little bit more. So they really got to know more than the average male inspector, who can kind of skate by, sadly.
Yeah. Yeah. I've run into that quite a bit as well, even
Yeah,
recently.
yeah, yeah. So, but that's awesome that you're doing it. It's fun to see people overcome those challenges.
Hmm.
It's a shame that those challenges even exist, but it's just the world we live in. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
I think
yeah,
it's
there,
becoming more diverse now.
yeah, yeah, and there is something like I would love to hire a female or a woman home inspector, because there
Hmm.
is that woman connection. It used to be, I think real estate used to be primarily male dominated like a long time ago.
Hmm.
Majority was males. And now it's, I think, like at least 60%, maybe even like, way higher than that. That's
Yeah.
women, so it's very much a woman dominated field
Hmm.
nowadays. And there is something that, that all woman team, you know, when it
I mean,
comes
I
to the,
push for it, so I can't say anything about it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I tend to, even growing up, I tend to kind of circle around guys more than women. It's just I'm not I'm pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
I'm not really into the drama or the cattiness or the
right.
gossips. I didn't really fit into those kind of environments very well. So being an engineer, it's much better. My husband's a nurse, and so he comes home and talks about all of the women in his field
Yep, yep.
and how they gossip and start drama at work. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I didn't have any drama today.
No, no, we just make fun of people. That's what we do. Just make
Yeah.
fun. So, what's some of the wild and crazy that you see when you're out and about?
Yeah. Um, I went to I went to West Virginia once, and this deck on the back of the house had partially collapsed,
Mhm.
and they didn't know why. And it was built on like a concrete, had like a retaining wall, and then concrete over stuff up to the house. And so
Yeah,
the posts were just sitting on what I thought was concrete. but the concrete had blown out and it was sitting on trash. So their deck was literally being supported by trash and like maybe 2 inches of concrete with no reinforcing. So that collapsed. And I don't think people realize how dangerous decks are because there was no code
Right.
for it until like 2018. And so that was a fun one. I had another one recently that they were doing some renovations in a laundry room. So they were taking out the floor and they saw some termite damage on the floor. And so they started taking out more and more and more. And this whole exterior wall was just termite damage, like all the way up. And it was a bearing wall for the roof and the floor above. It was so bad. I was like, you cannot occupy that room above there unless like for a while.
It's amazing how bad termite damage can be before
Yeah.
anyone knows.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we
Yeah.
went out. I went out to past Charlottesville up in the mountains for a
Mhm.
house. I don't know, about a year or two ago, and there was a pretty big drop off, top of the mountain
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
thing,
Hmm.
and the deck was like you see the footers, and they just wasn't doing their job. It probably just wasn't deep enough, and so the deck was actually pulling away from the house as it was sliding down
Hmm.
the mountain. It was supposed to be an attached deck because there was no posts to make it a freestanding deck, but
Hmm.
there was no bolts through the board. So they took a 2x4 on because as it was pulling away from the house, it started to sag on the backside.
Hmm.
There's nothing attaching it to the house.
Hmm.
So they just took a 2x4 on a block and just help prop it up. That's great.
2x4s aren't like good braces. They're not very strong, honestly. You like at a minimum, this is a PSA to everybody. At a minimum, do 2x6 or 4x4. 2x4s, just ignore them.
I mean, I don't know. I see a lot of 2x4 work in crawl spaces, so a lot of people think that that's the solution for everything.
Okay, well,
Put a
if
2x4
it's
on it.
short, if it's like only 12 inches tall, then maybe so. But like if you're doing anything over 4 feet, do not use a 2x4.
Yeah, yeah,
Unless it's braced. Just it's so silly. I've seen that a lot too.
yeah.
Um, what was it? I had one here in Charlottesville where um the deck was pulling away from the house, but it was bringing the house wall with it.
Oh wow.
So the house wall was bowing like this, and then this was the floor above, and it was like leaning out like that. And um, they were like, "What happened?"
Yeah.
And so I like showing home inspectors and real estate agents this. I showed a picture of the deck, and I was like, "What do you think happened?" And they're like, "I don't know. Just the deck boards look like they're deflecting." I'm like, "You're right. There was a hot tub up there, and that's not designed for a hot tub." And it was the weight of it was pulling the whole deck away from that house and pulling that exterior wall because of a hot tub.
That's awesome.
And so I was like, new buyer, do not put a hot tub there, please. Unless you want to, then call me and we will reinforce it. But do not do it as is.
Yeah, there's a picture circulating not too long ago down in Gatlinburg. I don't know if you saw that one or not, but it was a
I don't
deck.
think so.
Yeah, one of the cabins down there. Um, a little girl got in a hot tub on the deck, and there wasn't rated for the hot tub, and it wasn't attached, and it just collapsed
Hmm.
with the little girl in it. Fortunately, she was fine. I mean, just
Oh
some
my
bumps and
goodness.
bruises, but yeah, I mean, that's what I tell people. I say I hate decks. I hate inspecting decks because every one we do, there's a bunch of stuff wrong with it. They're never done right. Um,
Yep.
yeah, it's just a headache. And then we get that pushback, like, well, it's fine. It's been like that for 10 years. I go, okay, it works until it doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah. We just my husband's gonna kill me for saying this, but we just redid our deck boards and our railing on our deck, and I literally handed him the Simpson Strong Tie deck guide, which is amazing. Everybody should get it. And I was like, here, this is how you attach the 6x6's intermediate post to the framing. And here are all the screws that you need. Here is literally everything you need. I go out there and check it when he's done. I'm like, you didn't do it right. Like I literally gave you everything you needed and you didn't do it right. Like I can't we can't like eventually sell our house. Literally, a structural engineer lives here. You did it wrong. Like, yeah, I made him redo it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I imagine most of what you get called out for real estate agents is for foundation cracks and movement and things like that.
Yeah, that and there's a lot of trusses that either have been cut or are broken that maybe they
Yeah,
didn't get the pre-drywall inspection done, and they were broken for a while, and their roof is like this because of that.
yeah, we see that
Got
a
a lot of
lot.
those too.
Yeah. So what's your advice on cracks, foundation cracks as a because one of the issues in our industry, and it's not that it's a bad issue, it's just the way it is. When you go to home inspector school, they basically tell you that if you see a crack that's, I think, an eighth of an inch or bigger, maybe quarter inch, but I think it's eighth of an inch, that you should automatically refer a structural engineer.
Mhm.
That catches a lot of flack for a lot of inspectors because, you know, you see one crack in the entire house and it's an eighth of an inch, and it's like, hey, go spend $500 on an engineer.
More than that now.
Yeah, yeah. So, so it's one of those things. And
Yeah,
it's a liability issue for inspectors, and I get
yeah.
it. We try to look at the big picture. What's the whole house doing? What's the
Hmm.
conditions, all that stuff. Is there more than one crack? Is the floor dropping? All that fun stuff.
Yeah.
But what's the things that you look for when you go in and you see that there's, whether it's a recommendation from an inspector or buyer or seller or whatever, when it comes to the foundation cracks?
Yeah, that's a good question. The eighth of an inch wide crack is a great indicator whether it's cosmetic or structural. I think that's industry standard. Um, so even if it is in a structural item, like a foundation wall, then and if it's only less than an eighth of an inch, it's not necessarily structural until it grows. Um, so it's what you're doing is correct, like looking at the house as a whole and seeing how it's kind of moving. So for especially for new construction, you have soil or dirt that you're building your house on top of that didn't have load and now it's loaded. So it's gonna settle. And the code allows, they give you a bearing pressure minimum, and that's how you design your footings. And if it's, the inspector goes out on site, third party inspector goes out on site and tests the soil basically with a piece of rebar to see if you get that bearing pressure. And they're like, yeah, it looks like it's probably pretty good soil, but that doesn't mean that your house isn't going to move. So your house is still going to move when it's on any sort of bearing pressure soil. So um, cracks are expected to happen, especially with concrete. Concrete cracks all the time, which is why we put rebar in there, and that's why we put fiber in there to help reduce the cracking and mitigate the cracking. And that's also why we put control joints in there so we can direct the cracking to those control joints. So it depends on what it is. So and it also depends on how old the house is.
Sure.
So with new construction, it's either concrete masonry unit, which is CMU in my world, but it's also cinder block in homeowners worlds and
Yeah.
Lowe's. For that, like nowadays, you have like a minimum reinforcement that you put in there to resist any sort of load that's coming against it. And you put a foundation drain on the top of your footing to help mitigate any water that goes behind it. So newer construction, you wouldn't expect to see those horizontal failures like you would in older construction. Whereas in older construction, they don't have those footing drains, they don't have the rebar in the cinder block. And so they're just relying on the weight of the house on top of it to prevent it from bowing or moving,
Right.
which a lot of times is not enough. So um, the biggest issue is a horizontal crack. And I know that they teach you that um, in school, and the bowing of the
Yep.
wall. So if it's bowing, it means it's failing. it's not doing its job. It's the forces outside are pushing on it. It's mostly because of water. So you want to divert water somehow, either with downspout extenders or gutters or grading, maybe a combination of all three of those. And sometimes I recommend putting like a French drain down as far down as you can possibly go to try and divert the water away from the foundation. All of those will help. And then if you want to repair it, depending on how severe it is or how out of plane it is, you can do the carbon fiber straps, you can do the steel beams, you can put in like buttress walls. There's a lot of different ways to solve the issue based on like what your budget is and what you want to use that space for, and also how bad it is. So that's why I always tell people to call a structural engineer before calling a foundation company, because they're going to tell you the most expensive way to do it. And I can tell you your three options and you can decide which one is the best option for you and the use. But the step cracks for the cinder block aren't as big of a deal unless it's moved out of plane. So like it's come in or out. Then that becomes a little bit more of a big deal because it's shearing somewhere and it's moving somewhere. But if they're just cracked along the mortar joint, you can just seal that kind of up and prevent water from getting in, making it worse, essentially, because you don't want water in your basement.
Right.
And then for concrete, sometimes it cracks at the rebar, sometimes it cracks because there's not enough rebar. At that point, if it gets to 1/8 of an inch or more, you can inject it with epoxy, which is what I recommend. I think Simpson makes one, I think Hilti makes one, and it goes all the way through the crack from the inside to the outside and all the way down. And that's a good way to seal it, but it's not necessarily meaning that your wall is failing. It just means that it's probably not reinforced enough to mitigate.
Right.
That was a very long-winded explanation about concrete and CMU foundation walls.
Yeah, that was great. That was great. Yeah, we do the same thing when we see cracking and whatnot, in terms of who we recommend. Yeah, because I tell pretty much every client that you can call a foundation company. We recommend an engineer because it's like us. You're out there to inspect. You're not there to repair it. So you're paying for just that assessment, not future business.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that every company does that, but there's kind of a separation there.
Yeah, you have someone protecting your interest as a homeowner versus someone who's protecting their interest as a company, but also trying to protect their liability. It's not like they're going to tell you something wrong most cases, but it is good to get an unbiased opinion will give you multiple options that you can price out and figure out what is best for your budget and your use of space and the issues that you're having. Like you can put a Band-Aid on something, but if you're not diverting the water away, then it's not really helping you.
Yeah.
So yeah. I follow up a lot of foundation contractors who come out and say like, here, I'll fix it for $50,000. And I come out and I'm like, oh no, I don't think you actually need to do that. I think you just need to seal the cracks and you're good to go.
Yeah.
And save them which will cost like maybe $1,000. So, that is also potentially an option. So I always push to hire either a structural engineer or a geotechnical engineer. Either one of those will be able to kind of talk through and figure out what's going on and how to fix it.
What's the worst one you've seen?
Foundation?
Yeah.
I saw one. Okay, I have two of them that come to mind. One where a tree fell and the addition was built on top of the roof. And so the tree fell and pushed the foundation up and just lifted that entire addition off of the ground. That was pretty nuts. I know that's a kind of a special and very specific case, but it was pretty intense. And then another one, the footing was not deep enough, so it didn't go below frost depth.
Mhm.
And so so basically frost depth is how far the ground freezes during the winter time. So if you're below that, then the soil's not going to freeze and it's not going to expand and contract. So if yeah, so you want to put your footing below frost depth. If it's not, then the soil around it will expand and contract and move that footing.
Yeah.
So it moves it a lot of times that out of plane, and then brings the wall out of plane and cracks, and then rotates, and then your floor joists deflect, and your walls crack, and everything settles, and it looks very bad. I've had a couple of those, so that's definitely a code requirement nowadays. I think that was built in the 50s or something like that. So that was a big oops.
That'd be- yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
those
did
are
one.
those are the severe ones.
Yeah, I did one in Newport News, and um, I mean, inside you saw all the signs. You know, there's some pretty decent drywall cracking, doors out of
Hmm.
square, drops in the floor, and you go underneath, and there's jacks like everywhere, like all over. And I was like, man, this doesn't make sense. And well, and you looking at the joists, like they look kind of far apart, and they were like 24 inches on center, the floor joist.
Hmm.
And I mean, the house was built like the 60s, and that was just wild that somebody thought that was a good idea, you know. But you just see it just couldn't support the weight. Uh,
Yeah,
you know, it was too far of a span
yeah.
for a long time.
Most old houses have wood that's not rated.
Mhm.
Um, Most of the wood is like something they found on the property and like milled it themselves,
Yep.
and then it shrank, or it has knots or whatever. Um, so it's not all of them are the same strength as they are regulated now.
Mhm.
So some of them probably would fail, and some of them probably would pass. If I were to like grade them all individually and run the counts individually, but most of the time it's like a deflection thing that fails on older, maybe even historic homes. But you don't have to bring them up to code unless it either bothers you, or you're changing the occupancy, or you are changing the floor system itself, like cutting a hole in or
Right.
something like that,
Right.
if you're modifying
Yeah.
it. So a lot of people are like, oh, these old homes have really bouncy floors, and they're not up to code. Yeah, they're not, but they don't have to be.
Right.
And that's a hard thing that I tell people when I go into after home inspectors, and they say, these are probably not up to code, and the floor is really bouncy, or there's cracks from deflection over the years. I'm like, well, they don't have to be up to code.
Right.
Like, will they fall down? Probably not, but they're going to be sloped, and they're going to be bouncy, and there's things you can do to reinforce them, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
So that's a hard thing for homeowners to swallow.
It is because especially when we do, because we can't cite code, we can't, you know, that's go to home inspector jail if we bring up code. So, but we'll tell people, hey, look, well, there's pluses and minuses to that. The plus is that we can expand what we can write up, right? We're not limited by that. So a lot of times we'll see defects per se. That's when the house was built was okay, but we know more things now. So we say, hey, you should probably add a GFCI receptacle here.
Yeah,
And it's a good idea. It's cheap,
yeah,
easy, but you can't really ask for the seller to do that because they're going to say grandfather, right? It was
right, right.
the downside is that when we know something is wrong and we know that it was done incorrectly, and we're being told that it's okay, like, well, no, code says that you're wrong, but
Yeah.
uh,
I
but
think
go ahead.
I think it's really important to like differentiate between it's wrong and it's dangerous.
Right.
Yeah, and that's I think is hard to determine as someone who's just doing like a 2-hour inspection of a house, kind of an overview.
Yes,
Like,
it
is this
is.
dangerous, or is it just something that needs to be replaced, or is it just not to code?
Yeah, I mean, and I did one, or I did two 3 or 4 weeks ago for the same agent. We spent all day together. I think we're still friends after that day. But the first one was in Brandermill. I don't know if you know anything about Brandermill community down here, but it was built on shrink swell soil back in like the 80s. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Like every house I've ever done in there has foundation cracks.
Mm-hmm.
They've had work done, one or the other. And this one had a decent amount of patching in the crawl space, but it was cracking again, and some other things that I found in there, and come to find out, they just had like 50 grand worth of foundation work like 3 months earlier.
Oh.
And I said, well, obviously talk to the company and see what all they did and all that fun stuff. And then the afternoon one, it was on a hill. And you can see the corner of both sides of the foundation had step cracks in it. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
if this was on like just flat land, like I probably wouldn't care that much. But
Mm-hmm.
because it's on the backside, it's sloping, and the deck is already jacked up because of it, I don't want to be responsible for that.
Right, right. Yeah.
So, going back to the point, there for 2 or 3 hours trying to piece together puzzles when we're looking at 1,000 different things.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard. So
It
that's
is.
why,
Yeah.
and I told them, you can get an engineer out here, they may say everything's okay. And that's great, but I'd rather it, you spend a couple extra dollars and they say, hey, do all the things that you do as an engineer, say that's fine, versus you not, and me say everything's okay, and then in 2 years your foundation's at the bottom of the hill.
Yeah. Like, what was it Utah or Colorado where that house just like slid down the hill?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Typically foundations, if they're built, you know, deep enough, if they're built below that frost depth, they also have to be built so that the influence zone where your footings distributing the load is outside of that slope. So if you have your 2-to-1 ratio out here and then your slope's like this, then you're putting pressure outside of where the soil is. So as an engineer, when I do new builds, we want to take into account the topography so that we don't have that issue, so we have it far enough below grade so that it's not going to slide out, especially with any sort of erosion or eventual erosion. So it's like usually 24 or more inches below grade at that point. So yeah, if you see signs of that, it would probably cause me concern too. I'd probably want them to dig up the footing and verify.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
especially if you're seeing it, decks, like I said, decks are the most sketchy part of your house. They probably didn't put those below frost depth because they didn't have to.
No.
So that's probably that's moving.
And of course, you had your uncle's brother, cousin.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Deck, because he
Build
did it once.
a deck with a couple beers and some pizza.
Yeah. Yeah. The worst one I've done, it was actually not that long ago, probably a month or two ago. I posted the picture of the screwdriver disappearing into the ground.
Oh yeah, I think I commented on it.
Yeah, that was the worst one I've ever done. I got out and I told the agent, I said I didn't need to spend as much time in a crawl space as I did, but I was just fascinated by how much stuff I kept finding. Like they used OSB for shims between the beam and
nice. Okay.
Yes, nothing bad will happen with that.
Yeah.
The main beam was cantilevered on the end. It wasn't resting at all.
I might be okay with that.
Yeah.
It depends. Yeah.
Multiple joist wasn't even touching like the seal plate. It was just floating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she sent that report to a foundation company, a reputable one around here.
Mm-hmm.
And they called back and said, yeah, we're not going out. They said, call an engineer. When the engineer goes out, we'll go out. So she called the engineer, and the engineer said, send me the report. Sent the report. He called back. He said, I ain't going out there. And he says, you got to jack it up and start all over. He said, it's just all wrong.
Wow.
And,
okay.
So she called the agent. The agent's like, oh, there's nothing wrong with this house. She said, did you pull permits? She said, oh, we ain't got to. He said, okay. I think we're good.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that the engineer was like, "No, I'm not gonna go out there." My
Yeah.
curiosity would be like, let me go look at it."
Right. That's something you gotta see in person. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because the pictures
yeah,
just didn't do it justice.
yeah,
It was a sight to behold. It really was.
yeah. I've seen that when I've gone in crawl space and I'm like, "Oh, here's one thing. Oh," and you start, like, kind of peeling back, like,
Yeah.
insulation. You're like, "Oh, no. Oh, it's so much worse than you thought."
I
I'm gonna feel so bad telling these people.
Yeah, yeah. I told us the good news is I got lots of social media content. Bad news
There you
is
go.
it's a complete redo. Yeah, that's just
Yeah.
nothing that they touched in that house was correct. Like they changed the pitch angle of the attic,
Uh-huh.
and they just used scabbed 2x4s, just like scrap wood, basically, to make the rafters on the backside. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, I love hearing that. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So last question, shifting from foundation to trusses and eye joists, going back to what you said before about some of the bounciness kind of is what it is. One of the things that I've seen with new construction is they use a lot of eye joists now.
Yeah.
And of course everybody's getting these giant kitchen islands, that's as big
Mhm.
as a bedroom. And after they move in, they load up their kitchen with all the stuff, and every time they walk around it, it starts bouncing and jiggling, and you hear all the plates jiggling in the dishwasher. And they say, hey, when we get called out and say, hey, is this okay? And of course, the answer is, the spans and everything are okay. The
Mhm.
problem is it's rated for it, but it's just springy because of the weight of the kitchen island. Um,
Yeah.
you've seen some of them start going back under and kind of putting like a little up here, just kind of
Mhm.
help support it, but it's fine without it. But what do you see, or because our recommendation is always, busted truss, cut truss. We see a lot of the flanges for the eye joists get drilled through by
Mhm.
plumbers.
Mhm.
Plumbers love
Yep.
cutting those. Even for like 1 inch, 1.5 inch PEX lines. And the answer always is, unfortunately, manufacturers say that you're not supposed to do any of this.
Mhm.
And if you do, you got to contact them or an engineer to make sure it's okay.
Mhm.
So what's your take on all that? And
Well, there's a lot of things there.
yeah,
Cutting the floor joists, they have these fun joist reinforcers. Like if you Google joist reinforcers, they're like steel plates you can put on either side of either a TJI I-beam, wood I-beam, or even like a I think it has to be a minimum 2x10. And you can reinforce it and use a bigger hole than what is spec'd, or even like drill through um, the top chord of that eye joist. Um, so I don't recommend doing it, but they do have those joist reinforcers there for those instances, and I think they're like 150 bucks each, and they're super reasonable. So I usually recommend that for the kitchen island thing. What people don't realize is that the code allows for a certain amount of deflection per your span. So if you have, um, a 10-foot span, let me do easy math here, 10-foot span, and you have, I think it's L over 360, you're allowed 0.33 inches of deflection. So over a quarter of an inch deflection at
yeah,
the middle of your floor. And that's only for a 10-foot span. Whereas if you're, spanning more than that, everybody wants open concept now, 18 feet long with TJIs, you're going to be allowed to have a lot more deflection.
yeah.
Um, and that's just code minimum. That's what you're allowed legally. And so a lot of these kind of spec houses use code minimum. They don't upgrade the floor joists. And so you're allowed, up to like half an inch deflection, and people then load it as, even like a normal kitchen table or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it's see, but it's allowed by code. That's what you're paying for. You're not paying for upgraded floors. Um, there are things you can do to reinforce it and make it less bouncy by like stiffening it or putting an extra beam or blocking or whatever. But I think people's expectations for new builds are that their floors are never going to be bouncy ever again. But that's unrealistic, and I don't think people really realize what the code means, and what they're paying for, which kind of sucks because it's just you're spending $350 a square foot to buy a really nice house, and then you have bouncy floors, but there's really nothing you can do about it because it's code. It's
Yeah, it's
allowed by
allowed.
code.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're doing a custom build, a lot of people put like double joists
Mhm.
beneath the island area or beneath like fish tanks and things like that,
Yeah.
that they are anticipating, or pianos even,
Yeah.
to help reduce that deflection. And that's usually what I recommend if it's like an unfinished basement or crawl space. But people who either are in an existing house and they're renovating it and then put the island in there, I mean, you can reinforce it, but I would expect to see some deflection for sure.
Yeah, my favorite's always the renovations,
Yeah.
Yeah, overloading things. Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
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 Well, I
Yeah.
won't
That's
take up any more of your time. I know you're a busy person. You got lots of things to do, I'm sure, on this Friday.
hmm
But I appreciate you coming on. I really enjoyed it. This is stuff we can probably talk about all day long.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But we'll have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Thank
And
you for having me.
yeah, real quick, what's your coverage area? How far are you willing to go?
Right now I'm in Charlottesville, but I'm trying to move to Mineral right now, which is about halfway between Charlottesville and Richmond. So I'm
Okay.
eventually like to expand to Richmond area as well, and kind of do like a 45-minute radius of
Yeah,
Mineral area, maybe even an hour if I can put a couple back to back.
sure.
But yeah, I mean, they can always shoot me an email and ask if
Yeah.
I can cover that area. If not, I can refer them to somebody else,
Yeah, I would love for you to start coming down to Richmond. That would be great.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If people want to get a hold of you, how do you do it?
Um, I have my email is Valerie, VALERIE at Valerie Hill HILLPE.com. My website is ValerieHillPE.com. I am on Instagram. I am very active on Instagram. I like to comment on everybody's home inspection post. um, at valerie.hill.pe on Instagram. Either one of those. You can also call me. My number's on my website, or shoot me a text. Any of those I often respond to.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, it was great. It was great, like doing this virtually too.
Yeah.